People spend most of their lives at work, yet know almost nothing about each other. We see our colleagues every day, and at the same time, don't see them at all. Here are stories about the strangest things people noticed about their coworkers. At first, they seem like funny little quirks, but behind each one hides something far deeper. One colleague of ours, a quiet accountant nearing retirement age, left work every Friday with a huge backpack stuffed to bursting. He always came in with it empty and left with it full. We imagined all sorts of things, of course. Some said he was hauling home office supplies, others that he had something illegal in there. There were endless jokes. One day, I offered to give him a ride because it was pouring rain, and he agreed, clutching the backpack to his chest. On the way, he asked me to turn off to a small building on the outskirts. It turned out to be a children's hospice. Turns out he'd been collecting, for many years, what people in the office threw away. Written off but still working laptops, old phones, even broken toys that he then repaired in the evenings. And he took it all to children who had little time left so they'd have something to play with and learn from. Not once in 7 years did he tell anyone about it. "Why talk about it?" he shrugged. "It's not for talking." That evening, I sat in my car in the rain for a long time and couldn't drive away. This guy at our office disappeared for half an hour every day at 3 p.m. We thought he was smoking or running to the boss. Turns out he went to his car in the parking lot to sleep, setting an alarm. One day I caught him, lying there, covered with a jacket, a cardboard sign on the windshield saying, "Do not disturb." He said it was his technical reboot break. The funniest part? He was the most productive guy in the department. A colleague kept a live snail in her drawer. She'd feed it cucumber during calls, said it calmed her down. One day the snail vanished, and she seriously emailed the whole office asking, "Has anyone seen Charlie?" Charlie was found a week later in the pot with the ficus. She cried from happiness. One manager talked to himself, not whispering, full dialogues with different voices. We thought he had earbuds in and was on a call. Turns out he was rehearsing difficult conversations in advance. One time I heard him fire himself, then talk himself into staying. A girl from accounting brought lunch in containers labeled with names. Monday, Greg. Tuesday, Steve. I once asked who they were. Turns out she named the meals by mood. The cutlets were Greg because he's reliable and a little boring. I still can't eat cutlets in peace. Our sysadmin walked around the office in his socks. Always. Left his shoes under the desk. Nobody asked. We got used to it. Then a new director came in and took his shoes off too. Said, "I see this is the custom here." Now the whole department is barefoot. It became corporate culture. A colleague greeted the coffee machine every morning. "Good morning, beautiful." We laughed, until the machine broke down and he brought it flowers, set them next to it in a glass. The repairman who came over asked whose funeral it was. One guy collected other people's pens. Not stealing, just the ones people left behind. He had about 200 in his drawer, labeled with tags saying where and when each was found. When he quit, he held a reunion auction, returning pens to their owners. Half the people didn't even remember losing them. The girl at the next desk knitted during meetings. Needles, a ball of yarn, dead serious. The boss tolerated it, and for the holidays she gave everyone a hat with their initials. Turns out she memorized everyone's head size by eye during meetings. They all fit perfectly. A colleague set an alarm on his phone every 47 minutes. Not 45, not 50. I asked why. He said, "I read that this is how the brain rests best." I Googled it. No such study exists. He made it up 10 years ago and still lives by it. And honestly, he looks like the calmest of us all. We had a man who wore the same clothes every day. Gray t-shirt, black jeans. We thought it was thrift or a Steve Jobs thing. Turns out he had a closet at home with 20 identical sets. Said he didn't want to waste decisions on trivial things. Then he got divorced and the next day showed up in a pink shirt. We understood everything without a word. One woman saved every compliment in a separate folder in her email. "Thanks for the help. You saved the project." All of it went there. The folder was called For a Rainy Day. One day she was having a terrible day and just sat there rereading those emails. That's when I started a folder like that too. A colleague brought his own coffee from home in a thermos, even though there was a good coffee machine in the office. I once asked why. He said his wife made this coffee for him every morning, and it was the only piece of home he brought with him. She died 3 months ago. He still carries the thermos. Now he brews it himself, but the way she taught him. One programmer gave names to his bugs. Today, I battled Gerald. We thought it was a joke, but he kept a real list with the characteristics of each. When he fixed a bug, he held a little funeral, crossed out the name, and wrote the date. His oldest bug lived with him for 2 years. He almost missed it when it was gone. The girl at the front desk could guess who was coming by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. That's Megan. She's in heels today. And she was never wrong. We made a bet. Everyone lost. Turns out she'd worked there 8 years and just knew everyone, but it sounded like a superpower. A colleague kept a stone on his desk, an ordinary gray stone from a river. When he was stressed, he'd squeeze it in his hand. One day, someone played a joke and hid the stone. He didn't get angry, just sat quietly, not knowing what to do with his hands. We all chipped in and returned the stone with apologies. Nobody ever touched it again. One of our designers went outside every day at exactly noon and stood for hours by an old chestnut tree across the road. He'd just stand there, looking at it, sometimes saying something. We thought he was having a psychological crisis. We even wanted to talk to HR. One day I couldn't take it and went out to him. Turns out he had planted that chestnut 8 years ago, right when he first got the job. He put a nut in the ground after his first workday because he was nervous and didn't know if he'd last. Now it was a big tree, and he came to it every day, like to an old friend. We grew up together, he said. That day I stood by the chestnut too. For some reason, it warmed my heart. A colleague from the next department brought a big cardboard box to work every Friday and wouldn't let anyone peek inside. He'd put it under his desk, cover it with a sweater, and watch all day to make sure no one came close. Naturally, the whole office built theories, from smuggling to a kitten. Some seriously thought he had a side gig as a courier carrying other people's parcels. Until one day, the box quietly meowed. Turns out, he was rescuing stray cats, picking them up off the street, washing them, fattening them up at home, and on Fridays driving them to the vet, because that was the only day the clinic took walk-ins without a line. The box was a carrier. In 3 years, he found homes for 47 cats. The 48th, ginger and crooked in one ear, he kept for himself. We had a woman who never used the elevator. She always walked up to the 9th floor, even with heavy bags, even in the heat. The young interns took it as a challenge and tried to keep up with her. No one could. We thought she was just a health nut. We even mocked her behind her back. One time, after a company party, she relaxed a bit and told the story. Turns out, about 10 years ago, she got stuck in an elevator in an old building for nearly 4 hours, alone, in the dark, with no signal. She had a panic attack then that she still remembers in every cell of her body. Ever since, only the stairs. "I'm not fighting the fear," she said. "I'm just proving to myself every day that I have another way." The next day, I couldn't bring myself to laugh anymore. One IT guy of ours sat in noise-canceling headphones literally the entire workday. Even at lunch, even when he went to the bathroom, he took them with him. We considered him an unsociable introvert and gradually stopped bothering him. He never offended anyone, he was just always sort of in his own world. One day, his headphones died right in the middle of the day, and he suddenly froze, as if the ceiling had collapsed on him. I came over to ask if everything was okay. Turns out he has hyperacusis, a rare thing where the brain can't filter sounds, and ordinary office noise feels like a jackhammer in his head. Without the headphones, he physically couldn't work, or even think. He'd kept quiet about it for years, afraid people would consider him a problem. That same week, we chipped in and bought him professional headphones with a backup battery. For the first time ever, he took them off to say thank you. A colleague from accounting ate the exact same thing every lunch: a boiled egg, black bread, and an apple. For years. We invited her to go to a cafe together. We ordered pizza for the whole department. She always politely declined and pulled out her container. Some thought she was on some weird diet. Some thought she was a cheapskate. Someone even joked she was saving up for a yacht. One day she stayed late with me and we got to talking. Turns out she was raising 3 kids on her own, and every dollar saved on lunch went toward their classes. The oldest goes to violin, the middle one to swimming, the youngest to art. "I'll eat at home," she said calmly. "But you can't start violin at 40. The next day, I brought her a proper lunch and lied that the cafe had a 2-for-1 deal. We had a security guard, Walter, who knew every person in the building by name, and that's over 300 employees. Not just names, he remembered whose birthday it was, whose mother was sick, who'd just bought a car. We thought he simply had a phenomenal memory, a living wonder of sorts. Some even suspected he kept some secret notebook. One day I came in earlier than everyone and caught him at a strange task. He was sitting and repeating names out loud, looking at photos in an old notebook. Turns out he was developing dementia. The doctors had warned him his memory would fade, and every morning he came in an hour early to reread all of us, because he was afraid that one day he'd come in and not recognize the people he loved. "As long as I remember your names," he said, "I'm still here." I don't know if anyone else has had a security guard they actually wanted to come to work for. A colleague always kept an old, worn photograph of some boy about 7 years old on her desk. She never talked about it, and if anyone asked, she'd quickly flip the frame face down. We, of course, decided it was her son, with whom she perhaps had a difficult relationship, and tactfully didn't pry. Someone whispered they assumed the worst. One day, during cleaning, the frame fell and I picked it up, and on the back was a note in someone else's handwriting. "Thank you for finding me." Turns out this woman had volunteered 20 years ago and helped find a missing boy whom everyone had already presumed dead. He was found alive. Now he's nearly 30, has his own family, and still sends her cards every New Year. "It's the best thing I've ever done," she said. "Everything else is just work." That was the first time I wondered how much we don't know about the people at the desk next to us. In our open space sat a man who came in every morning and put a small alarm clock on his desk. Not a digital one, but an old mechanical one with a bell. He'd wind it up and it ticked quietly all day. Colleagues complained about the sound, asked him to remove it. Some even filed complaints with management. He apologized but wouldn't remove the clock. He just moved to the farthest corner. We thought it was some stubborn quirk. Turns out this clock had belonged to his father, who worked his whole life at a factory and always said, "As long as the clock ticks, there's time to fix something." His father died last year, and the only thing the son asked for from the inheritance was this old alarm clock. The ticking reminded him that his father was somehow near. When we heard this, the complaints stopped, and a month later someone quietly set a second clock beside it, then a third. Now a whole collection ticks in our corner, and it's probably the calmest place in the office. One manager of ours had a strange ritual. Before every important presentation, he'd go to the bathroom, lock himself in a stall, and stand there in complete silence for 10 minutes. We heard him go in but never come right back out, and naturally all kinds of gossip arose about his health. The younger colleagues even nicknamed him the bathroom ghost. One time, before a big contract, I went in earlier and accidentally heard him whispering to himself, "You can do this. You've come so far. Dad would be proud." Turns out he stuttered as a child, was cruelly bullied at school, and doctors said he'd never be able to speak in front of people. And he became one of the company's best negotiators. Those 10 minutes of silence were his way of gathering himself and reminding himself how far he'd come. After that day, I never laughed at anyone's pre-presentation quirks again. A programmer colleague always had a little jar of multicolored buttons on her desk, and from time to time she'd run her fingers through them, especially when thinking over a hard problem. We considered it ordinary stress relief, like a spinner or a fidget cube, and paid no attention. One day, a new intern blurted out, "Oh, how pretty! Can I have one as a keepsake?" And she went so pale that we all fell silent. Turns out, every button in that jar had been cut from the clothes of her late grandmother, who had sewn all her life and raised her on her own. When her grandmother passed, the girl couldn't throw out her things, but couldn't keep a whole wardrobe either. So she cut off the buttons, one from each item, and carried them with her. Running her fingers through them, she felt as if she were holding her grandmother's hand. The intern was terribly embarrassed, and the next day he brought her a beautiful wooden box for those buttons. She burst into tears and hugged him. Now there's no jar, there's a box, and everyone knows it's the most precious thing in our office. We had a cleaning lady, Rosa, who every evening after her shift left little notes on certain employees' desks. Just scraps of paper. "Have a good tomorrow. You did great today. Drink some water." At first, everyone thought it was someone's joke. Then, that someone was confessing their feelings. Some even got a little scared, like, who's watching us? One day, I stayed late and caught her in the act. She was just writing a crooked letter on a yellow sticky note. Turns out she noticed which employees were having an especially hard time, who'd cried in the bathroom, who'd stayed late, who came in with red eyes. And she wrote notes to exactly those people, telling no one about it, because words cost nothing, but sometimes a person needs to know they're seen. She couldn't write neatly and was ashamed of it. For her birthday, we made her an album where everyone glued in the note from her they'd kept. Turns out almost everyone had kept theirs. One colleague of ours, a serious man around 50, a department head, locked himself in the meeting room every lunch break and played cartoons there. Real children's cartoons, with the sound on minimum. We found out by accident when someone walked in without knocking, and for a long time we didn't know how to react. It looked very strange for a man of his status. Behind his back, the snickering began. One day I came to him with some documents and asked him straight out. Turns out, his daughter is bedridden at home after an accident, and the only thing that brings her joy is the old cartoons they used to watch together. He watches them at lunch so that in the evening he can discuss every episode with her, as if they watched together, as if nothing had happened. "I can't give her back her legs," he said quietly, "but I can give her back the conversations." I walked out of that meeting room a different person. A colleague from logistics brought a thermos of soup to work every morning and poured it into little jars that he then handed out on his way home. We thought he was just very thrifty, or maybe selling homemade food as a side gig. Someone joked he'd opened an underground canteen. One day I gave him a ride and saw exactly who he gave those jars to. Homeless people under the overpass. He knew each one by name, exchanged a few words with each. Turns out 10 years ago he himself ended up on the street after losing his business and family, and survived only because one woman brought him hot soup every day and wouldn't let him give up. She never told him her name. When he got back on his feet, he promised himself he'd do the same, for those who are now where he once was. "I don't know which of them will ever rise up," he said, "but I want them to have the same chance she gave me." The next morning, I cooked a pot of soup for the first time in years. We had a girl who never took off her gloves, even in summer, even at the computer, thin cotton gloves. People gossiped, of course. Some said she was a germaphobe, others that she was hiding some tattoo or scars. Some avoided shaking her hand, and it was noticeable and hurtful. One day, we got stuck in the elevator together for a few minutes, and she, probably out of nerves, told me. Turns out as a child, she survived a severe fire while saving her little brother, and her hands were badly burned. Her brother survived without a single scratch. She wasn't ashamed of the scars. She was tired of the looks and the questions, of people seeing her hands first and her second. The gloves weren't about shame, but about peace. I told her then that her hands were the most beautiful I'd ever seen because they'd saved someone. A week later, she came in without gloves for the first time. No one said a word, and that was right. So next time you see a colleague doing something strange, don't be quick to laugh. Behind every odd habit, there's often a whole story you'd never even guess. Sometimes the strangest people turn out to be the kindest. And the best way to learn the truth is simply to ask.